Hey, we're so lucky today to have Andy Savitz on the line today on the Green is Good radio show. Andy, your bio is literally 3 pages long, but one of my favorite things in your bio is that you're a recovering lawyer. Besides being the author of The Triple Bottom Line, how the best companies are run in achieving economic and social and environmental success, and how you can too, and also owning your own consultancy called the Sustainable Business Strategies. Andy, you're one of the green rock stars before it was cool to be green. Welcome to Green is Good today.
Well, thanks, John. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, Andy, Mike and I were talking as a little intro before we brought you on how we define sustainability, planet, people, and profits, and how how really today we're talking about the triple bottom line and how you created that book and that whole concept. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that means to our listeners and what the triple bottom line means as the green revolution really picks up velocity in America?
Well, planet, people, and profits is really in some ways the basis of my work. That's a phrase that's been around for a while. But over the last 6 or 7 years, this idea of measuring companies by the triple bottom line of planet, people, and profits has really accelerated to the point where there are now ways of really measuring performance along those three, in those three categories. And investors, communities, employees, shareholders, regulators are now looking at corporations, not just in terms of the financial bottom line, but also in terms of their social and environmental performance.
I mean, you really have been one of the thought leaders into this whole movement, the whole green revolution. What is, and your consultancy, you work with some huge companies. Why don't you mention some of those huge companies, and what you do for them, but how do you really convince them? What's the trick? How do you convince them that the triple bottom line really exists and that they should really make these changes that you're suggesting?
Well, what I show them is how they can make money by doing the right thing. I mean, in my view, the power of the free market needs to be harnessed to address some of these gigantic environmental and social issues we face. And more companies are sort of seeing ways to do well and do good at the same time, which is really what the book is all about and what my consultancy is really about. So, for example, a simple example would be that Walmart has figured out that reducing their energy use, throwing away less trash, conserving water absolutely saves millions and millions of dollars on the bottom line. Their business model is all about how you reduce costs so that they can provide products at everyday low prices. So being environmentalists is fabulous business for Walmart, and it's a great example of what I call the sweet spot, operating where your business interests and the interests of society or the environment overlap.
Got it. And so this is now your proposition to businesses big and small is if they act in accordance with the terms that you said are define sustainability, people, planet, and profits, the triple bottom line, they're going to make more money. They're going to save money and therefore make more money.
No question about it. I mean, look at how Toyota invented the hybrid car, which is, gets twice the gas mileage, creates its own form of non-polluting energy, and has been fabulous for the corporation. I mean, they've really ridden the Prius to become the number one car company in the world, and in large measure, that's because they figured out a better, more environmentally sensitive way for people to drive.
Got it. And is that why some of our car companies here in America fell behind?
I think so. I mean, Toyota made a big bet in the mid-'90s that both the price of gas and concern for the climate would rise, and they are cashing in on both bets. When they first began to try and develop this new drivetrain, they were sort of laughed out of town, and now they're the ones doing the laughing. So we have other issues, too, with our automobile companies, but I think clearly Toyota got the jump on everybody, including other Japanese car companies, by coming up with this new way, this new technology, which is both good for the environment and great for profits.
How about other big companies? Like I was watching this morning CNBC, and they're starting their whole Green is Universal campaign again. Of course, that's the big GE. How about eco-imagination? Is that something that interests you and that you think has great validity in today's marketplace?
Well, I write about that in the book, and I also speak quite a bit about it. I think General Electric has found a gigantic sweet spot in saving the world from climate change. You know, they've got the world's second largest wind power business. They've got the world's largest gas turbine business. They have hybrid locomotive engines, super efficient jet engines, and nuclear power, which may not be the favorite of everybody, but it's certainly something that needs to be considered in an era of climate change. So they have created a gigantic momentum for their shareholders by investing in clean technology and doubling their revenues in the clean technology space over the last few years. So that's another fabulous sweet spot.
How about companies, speaking of sweet and speaking of sweet spot, let's look at something where companies didn't do the right thing per se. In some of your writings and in your speeches, chocolate is in the air right now with what's going on with Cadbury and everything like that. How about the Hershey Foods example that you've written about? Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that, how that works in reverse when companies don't make the right decisions?
Well, thanks for raising it. It's the first chapter of the book, and it's sort of a fascinating case study about how not to do the right thing. Hershey was trying to sell itself about 5 or 6 years ago to the highest bidder. Cadbury came along, I believe it was, with a bid for $12.5 billion, which was very much in excess of what Hershey hoped to get for itself. The problem was Hershey failed to talk to both the people in the town of Hershey and their own employees, who organized to essentially stop the deal. And when we did our research for the book, we found out that, had Hershey sort of brought those two key groups into the process and worked with them to sort of protect their interests, they would have gotten the sale done. So, part of being sustainable is working with people outside the organization that have a stake in the activities of your business, or even inside the organization. And Hershey failed to do that and suffered a gigantic financial setback as the result.
Got it. Wow. So
one point I do want to make is that even though we are in the age of, green, sustainability is very much also a social issue. And one of my favorite sweet spots involves one of my clients, which is PepsiCo.
Oh.
They saw the writing on the wall about obesity a little bit before the rest of the industry, and they realized that, obesity was going to rock their world in probably a negative way. What did they do to create a sweet spot? They went out and they bought an orange juice company and an oatmeal company. Tropicana and Quaker Oats are now part of the PepsiCo family of companies. And those products, the good-for-you products, are outselling the traditional sweet drinks and salty snacks by a considerable margin. So here's a sweet spot between shareholder value and profit and public health. And the company is deeply committed to figuring out ways to sell products in the developing world, single-serve packages of nutritional foods to people living on, in desperate poverty. And they see that as a gigantic financial opportunity, whereas organizations like the World Health Organization also see it as a major, potentially a major breakthrough in, dealing with health and famine in the developing world.
Wow.
So this is a gigantic social sweet spot, if you will, public health.
Sure.
For PepsiCo shareholders and for, people in this country who are eating better and people in the developing world who want to eat nutritional food.
So again, it enhances their bottom line tremendously while delivering something where there used to be an abject void in the marketplace for.
Absolutely. This is all about making more money by doing the right thing. Sustainability has nothing to do with philanthropy. Philanthropy is great, but it's about giving away money. Sustainability is about making more money by figuring out where this intersection is for your business and your business interests and the interests of society or the environment. And you can do that whether you're the neighborhood dry cleaner or whether you're General Electric or PepsiCo.
Well, Andy, you are inspiring, and what I want our listeners to come on back, because we're going to break for a commercial, and we're going to have you go tell us more about the triple bottom line and how our listeners can get more involved by listening to or reading your perspective on this. So come on back to Green is Good with Andy Savitz.
If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited to have Andy Savitz here today, the author of The Triple Bottom Line. And Andy also owns his own consulting firm, Sustainable Business Strategies. And to learn more about Andy or to contact him, all you have to do is go to www.getsustainable.net. Andy is one of the leaders, if not the leader, of the Green Revolution. Andy, great to have you on today. I want to just go back and hit upon a subject that we were talking about right before the break. The difference, Mike, we were talking, I want you to talk about it, the difference between profitability and philanthropy and sustainability and how they mesh together but also should be broken out.
Yeah, really, it sounded, Andy, I mean, you explained it in such a way that it just made me want to do a follow-up. Makes so much sense, because philanthropy is the act of giving away money. Well, unless you've got a money tree, sooner or later, the money is gone. But when it comes to profitability, that is sustainable, because if you're profitable in your business practices, you continually make money, which you can then distribute as you see fit.
Well, yes. I mean, a lot of people, especially inside companies, think that sustainability is about giving away money, but that's really philanthropy. Sustainability is about how you run, protect, and grow your business better. And as you say, Mike, you can give away money, but that will only temporarily solve problems. What we're trying to get here with sustainability is that corporations actually solve problems as part of doing business. So they're addressing environmental issues, they're addressing poverty, they're addressing disease as part of what they do to make money, and that, we hope, is an ongoing, i.e., sustainable process. God bless Bill Gates and God bless the corporations that give away money, but that isn't going to actually solve the problems. It's definitely needed in many cases. I don't want to say anything against philanthropy, but sustainability is a much more profound idea. It's that these problems are addressed by the free market as a way of doing business.
I'm so glad you broke that out, Andy. And another definitional issue in your book, you mentioned shareholders and stakeholders. Can you explain how you differentiate them and why they're both important?
Yes. Shareholders are investors in the company. They own, stock, or they may actually be just investors in other ways.
Sure.
Stakeholders is a broader concept. It actually means anyone or any group that has a legitimate stake in the activities of the corporation. So that might include the communities in which companies operate. It would include their employees. It would include environmentalists who, are concerned about climate change. Stakeholders would also include future generations, for example.
Right.
So it's a broader concept. So the way to think about shareholders is that they are a category of stakeholders. They have a financial stake in the company. Other people have different kinds of stakes in the company. Increasingly, shareholders are also concerned about issues that go beyond how much is my dividend going to be. And even those that aren't understand that their dividends are going to be affected by these other issues.
Got it.
So even the most hardcore profit maximizers are seeing that these environmental and social issues increasingly play a role in profitability.
Got it. Understood. How about, when it comes to we're talking about shareholders, we're talking about stakeholders, and we're talking about big business. And one of the, obviously Wall Street is part of the big business, is sort of the regulator of big business in terms of how we look at company value, equity value, and Wall Street now. We just lived through this economic crisis. So the Dow Jones Industrial, you have discussed before the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, which isn't talked about today on CNBC, but maybe one day will be. Can you define what that is and how that plays into all these great brands we've been discussing today so far, from Hershey to Toyota to Walmart?
Yes. In 1999, the Dow Jones put out a definition of sustainability, which basically says it's a way to maximize opportunities and minimize risk related to environmental, social, and economic issues, thus creating long-term shareholder value, not stakeholder, but shareholder value. So they said, look, from a business perspective, companies are facing a huge amount of environmental and social responsibility. What we're interested in is companies that can turn responsibility into financial opportunity. That was really, in some sense, the common definition of what the Dow Jones said. And what they did at that time was to create a list of 250 publicly held corporations that they independently said were figuring out ways to turn responsibility into opportunity. That list is called the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And what it does is every day you can see how those stocks are doing compared to the rest of the stock market. You can go right to the Wall Street Journal, and there's a little right next to, cattle futures.
Right.
It says Dow Jones Sustainability Index. What's important to know is that the Dow Jones Sustainability Index has outperformed the Dow Jones Index and pretty much every other market index since it was created in '99. So, companies that find these sweet spots, that figure out ways to turn environmental and social responsibility into financial opportunity, are going to do better, especially in a world that, is expecting them to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
So when any of us look at this list, and especially you being one of the foremost experts in this whole environmental revolution, do you feel that most of these companies are truly walking the walk besides talking the talk, or do you look at any of them and say, they're really not doing as much as they say they're doing and they shouldn't be really listed here? How do you look at that list? Because you have the greatest and the sharpest eye to that.
Well, let's face it. All companies are prone, I think, to exaggerate the good they do and to de-emphasize some of the problems that they have.
Sure.
I think that's just sort of the nature of the beast. On the other hand, I would say that this list of 250 companies, and there is a global index as well as a North American index, these companies are figuring this out probably better than the competition.
Got it.
It's an objective, this isn't some tree hugger figuring this out. This is the Dow Jones that's trying to do a sort of an objective analysis on these companies. And, companies do come into the index and they drop off the index. So, I think there's quite a bit of rigor in the system. This is an inexact science, this triple bottom line, but it's becoming more of a science and less of an art. So, there are ways to measure sustainability performance.
So I assume these companies on this list, to make this list and to be ranked on it, they have to produce every year a sustainability report.
Well, that's a very interesting and important question. Transparency and accountability are huge parts of what sustainability is all about. And increasingly, given the financial scandals, a huge part of what business is about. People want to know sort of what's behind the curtain. And, many of the world's largest companies, and many medium and small size, are now putting out annual sustainability reports. And there is a global standard for this. It's called the Global Reporting Initiative. And it's essentially generally accepted accounting principles for sustainability. So having one standard that every company can use has been very important in terms of moving companies to report on these issues.
Gotcha.
And the Dow Jones uses those reports, plus other things, as a way of sort of figuring out, who to list on this exchange and who not to.
Andy, we've gone through this horrible economic crisis, and since you've written the book in 2006, and now you have your own consultancy, Sustainable Business Strategies, and people can find you at getsustainable.net. How has the economic crisis affected your business and specifically your industry? Because truly, since that time that you've written the book to now, the green revolution has picked up major velocity, large part due to you and Al Gore. But how has it affected your business? Whereas other businesses, of course, suffered and some have gone out of business. How are you seeing your line of customers and client base?
Well, John, first, thank you. Unlike some people, that's the first time, and I love to be mentioned in the same sentence as Al Gore.
Okay. Well, you deserve
that may
it.
be the first time it's ever happened. But
you deserve it.
It has affected my business, honestly. I mean, I think, I'm a consultant. I do a lot of, paid speaking. And I think, consultancy and public speaking, on behalf of corporations or with corporations is to some extent seen as discretionary. So, like a lot of service businesses, I think I've been hurt by the recession. I think many companies understand that this is not a fad, that this idea that, the world is under environmental and social pressure, so corporations are going to increasingly be faced with these issues. This isn't going away, even in a deep recession.
Right.
I have a quick little story about this, which is I went to Las Vegas, last year, and all the casinos were doing things to, try and bring in business. But I went back to my room, and there was a story saying that the drinking water source for Las Vegas, which is Lake Mead, has a 50% chance of running dry by 2020.
Oh, boy.
That's in 10 short years.
Right.
So, the businesses are focused on their immediate economic survival, the casinos, I understand that. But if they don't keep their eye on the ball, they're all going to be out of business.
That's a great story and a great point.
And in general, I think companies understand that. Yes, in a serious recession, you need to do things maybe, sustainability is to some degree a long-term idea. It's about making sure that future generations have the ability to meet their own needs, that we're not just sort of using up all the resources. It's an intergenerational concept. And in a recession, people tend to get even more short-term in their thinking. But I think the good businesses are trying to figure out ways to manage the short-term so that they can lead on the long-term.
That is, I got you. We live in an information world now, and social networking is becoming more explosive and also creating all sorts of benefits. Can you explain to our listeners how IT departments and how the information age can be actually integrated into the triple bottom line, and maybe give one of your great examples of IBM using it to help get velocity to their initiatives inside their company?
Well, information is at the basis of all of this. I mean, social and environmental performance is increasingly moving, toward equivalency with financial performance. Metrics are, the accountants like to say, what you can't measure, you can't manage.
Right.
It is amazing to me still the number of companies that don't have a handle on how much water they're using or how much electricity. You would be shocked at some companies still don't really have a handle on sort of basic environmental or safety issues, for example, that are costing them money. They just don't even know the data. Once they have the data, they can begin to manage the issue. I mean, look at worker health and safety, for example. This costs gigantic money in terms of workers' compensation, insurance, litigation, reputation. Some companies don't necessarily make that connection to see that, keeping their employees safe is actually really good for the bottom line, not to mention that it increases your ability to retain and attract good employees.
Right.
IBM has developed some very sophisticated ways, software for helping companies, track some of these issues. And it's critical. I mean, And IT itself
Right.
is a major environment. People don't think computers have much to do with the environment, but
Right.
most of the computer that I'm sitting in front of right now, that you're sitting in front of right now, is basically only using about 3% of the power
Right.
that is being made of that is coming into the system. But 97% of it is being wasted.
Got it.
IT itself, in addition to enabling sustainability, is increasingly a part of the equation.
Got it. Well, we're down to the last minute or so, and I just wanted to. Can you leave our listeners with a couple of pearls of wisdom how they can live better in using your triple bottom line approach, and then we're going to wind up here, Andy.
There's many things we can all, think globally and act locally. We can all do things, in our homes, in our worlds, to make a little bit of a difference. Since I deal with corporations, what I'd like to say to your listeners is that as employees, they can do tremendous good in their companies. There have been many important sustainability initiatives that have started with the activities of one person in one company that has made a difference and then gets scaled up to global proportions. So look for ways inside, your job to actually make a difference, band together with other employees, find out what your company, big or small, is trying to do and help move the ball forward.
Andy, you are totally inspirational. We are so lucky and humbled to have you on our show today. Andy Savitz, the author of The Triple Bottom Line. To learn more about Andy or to get his services to your company, you just have to go to www.getsustainable.net. Andy Savitz, you are amazing, and you are truly living proof that green is good.